Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guests this week are Breanne, Lavallee-Heckert, and Seraph-Eden Carr. They are part of Red River Echoes, a collective of Métis in Manitoba and beyond, who are raising concerns over a series of statements and actions by the leadership of the Manitoba Metis Federation. The collective first spoke out after the MMF took out a full-page advertisement in a Winnipeg newspaper expressing solidarity with the Winnipeg Police Service. Breanne, Seraph, thanks so much for being with us this week.
Thanks for having us.
Breanne, let's start with you. Can you tell us a bit about what Red River Echoes is?
So the Red River Echoes is a growing collective of Métis people, Métis youth, members of locals, Métis leaders in the community, and we're really interested in returning to our traditional forms of governance. We're looking at being the voice that echoes from the past into the present, and also echoing the voices of other Métis people who don't see themselves in the current Métis government.
Seraph, how did you get involved with Red River Echoes?
I was involved with the Roostertown blockade. I think that sprung up in 2016, and it wasn't such a great experience, and for anyone who knows about that, it wasn't a good experience for anybody. And so I was added to a group of just Métis people. And when the letter from President Chartrand singing the praises of the Winnipeg Police Service came out, this group of Métis people sort of just came alive. And I wanted to be involved, and I wanted to share my knowledge and learn from them and just really support the group because I know there's a need for us. It just so happened that we sprung up now.
So if you say that it wasn't a good experience, the Roostertown protests there, can you elaborate on why that wasn't a good experience for you?
Very briefly. Besides the fact of being intimidated by someone with a lot of money and power and getting sued for defending the land. But another part of that was that there were some people that didn't quite understand the Métis and Indigenous land issue about it. And so it was sort of I like to say both speaking English, but speaking totally different languages. So it was uncomfortable, but we did what we did, and it's over now, and such is life.
Breanne, how did you become involved with this collective?
I was approached by one of the members on Twitter, and I was eager to join.
Let's talk about this open letter from the collective that was released shortly after. As you mentioned, the Manitoba Metis Federation took out a large ad expressing support for the Winnipeg Police Service. Sarah, maybe we'll start with you. What about that ad did not sit well with you?
Sort of the surprise, like nothing really shocks me anymore in this day and age, but the surprise that President Chartrand himself would take out this letter in his name, and I knew by being told, and also in my heart, just from what I know of many of my Métis friends and relatives, that this is not something that we thought was a good idea. And so the question was, where did that come from? Why on that day? Why that big and flowery, you know? For the WPS, in light of many people waking up to the fact that Indigenous people, including Métis people, are often at the end of a billy club. And so it was a shock, and it upset a lot of people.
Breanne, what were some of your issues with it? I know that the collective has, expressed support for Aisha Hudson's family and their efforts as well.
I think for me, it was Aisha Hudson. I don't know how any Indigenous person drives by the corner where she was murdered and doesn't feel something. And further to that doesn't feel something to the extent that they are willing to take out an ad. Like, there's really a piece of our heart as Métis people that's missing if the death of an Anishinaabe young woman doesn't get to us. And I think that that's really what it is for me. I was reminded of Tina Fontaine. I was just a teenager when Tina Fontaine was found, and that changed my life and how I was going to see myself as a young Métis person. And I'm sure for many young Métis people out there now, Aisha Hudson was that moment, and that our government was supporting the police instead of supporting Aisha. And, you know, this is how it keeps continuing. And it's about the broader issue of MMIWG. And yeah, so for me, that's really what it was. It was a very personal thing for me.
This is a question for either of you, I guess. Are Red River Echoes in favor of calls to defund the police, redirect that money to things like mental health, social services?
I mean, I don't think we've really discussed it clearly, but I think there's in our group a consensus that the police are violent towards Indigenous peoples. And I think in our first letter too, we did address comments about how we want to support groups that are looking at defunding the police. So, yeah.
Seraph, one of the other concerns raised by the collective was also raised by another group of Métis, actually, from all over Canada a year ago. And that was the lack of support for Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs and their allies in the fight against the Coastal GasLink pipeline. Was that a concerning point for you as well, comments coming from the MMF and the Métis National Council at that time?
Oh, yeah, and others. It's very confusing for me, and so I can assume, though I don't like to assume anything, put any words into anyone's mouth, but if I felt this way, I assume at least a handful of other people felt this way, that if we are adamant that we are Indigenous peoples, and many, many, many of us in the Métis, members of the Métis Nation, embody that indigeneity. We live it out in our lives. We listen to our elders. We love our customs. A lot of us are getting more in touch with the other groups and kinship groups around us, and talking about land claims and talking about colonization and occupation and usurpation of land, and knowing, not just being told in an academic sense, oh, this is wrong and this is how these systems work, but actually feeling it on the ground as an Indigenous person and being witness to violence and unfairness, to have someone who says he represents us in our entirety disregard the legitimacy of the Wet'suwet'en claim and their fight, and then pepper in a bunch of other stuff. It's confronting, and it's not about wanting to fight the MMF. It's not about wanting to make President Chartrand illegitimate, or none of us want to become president. That's not what this was about. It was to shine a light on the fact that there are many, many, many members of the Métis Nation across Manitoba that are not being heard, that feel they are actively, not just not being heard, but actively silenced. And so that would be one of those instances where the people are saying, we need to stand in solidarity. And the grassroots Métis people on the ground are standing in solidarity, but our government says to the public, who sees them as more legitimate in that colonial sense, that they don't agree. And so it almost illegitimizes the Métis people on the ground. And it illegitimizes Indigenous right and title. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Breanne, you know, the MMF and the Métis National Council have also supported, expressed support for the Trans Mountain Pipeline. The MMF in particular worked on, had a lot of Métis people worked on Enbridge's Line 3 project. I guess, do you see that there's a bit of a balancing act for them when it comes to some of these projects?
Yeah, absolutely. And all governments experience that balancing act. And I think it's important for us to look at the process. You know, the way that governments make decisions in a colonial context. I think the MMF often models that very well. But as Métis people, our governance system requires consensus from the community, requires discussion. And whether or not the MMF's current processes for decision making reflect that, I think that that's something that we all really need to take serious. And because, yeah, I absolutely agree that there are economic interests at play, and absolutely our people have been marginalized and dispossessed of land, and we've experienced colonialism in full force, and economic endeavors absolutely lift us out of poverty and change the lives of families. But we're here talking about systemic issues, and I think so this is the balance that needs to be struck, is how do we as Métis people govern ourselves in this context where we are colonized and have experienced that, but also where we stand true to who we are as Indigenous peoples who are stewards of the land. The land is ours to protect, and making sure that we're not walking the line to think that the land is ours to exploit, because I think that's a colonial mindset.
You mentioned governance, and we're going to talk about that. We've just got to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with Breanne and Seraph from Red River Echoes. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guests this week are Breanne, Lavallee-Heckert, and Seraph-Eden. They make up part of a collective known as Red River Echoes. And Seraph, maybe we'll go to you. And one of the other concerns that was raised in that initial letter to the leadership of the Manitoba Metis Federation was over the MMF's calls for the eviction of many Indigenous people who had set up camp near the MMF headquarters. Why was that something that the collective wanted to make note of in that initial letter?
Because we felt it was not just unfair for the MMF to have orchestrated that, behaved that way. Not just that it was unfair on a human level, but that it really was further alienation of our nations from each other. Many of those houseless people were Indigenous people. Mm-hmm. I'd hazard a guess that some of them were Métis people. We're all one family, and it has never been the Métis way, as far as I know, and I've been raised in my culture, that we dispossess, disregard, throw away, ignore, vilify people that are in distress and need our help. And one of the thoughts was, that ad that President Chartrand took out, in friendship and solidarity with the WPS. I wonder how much it costs and how much of that money could have better been served going into the community that was living out behind the Henry office instead of having them forcibly removed and throwing up fences. So we found that to be, and I personally found that to be, I'm trying not to use too harsh language, but it really disgusted me. It felt disgusting. And we took offense to that.
Been waiting to hear back from the MMF, but I believe I read somewhere that that ad was $30,000 itself. Breanne, there's also mention of President Chartrand dismissing calls to change the names of certain things in the city of Winnipeg, named after people who killed and hurt Indigenous people. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we wanted to draw attention to that because that was led by the community. It's the community who's out here seeing those names, living that reality of seeing the names of our oppressors and that action was so quickly dismissed by the MMF government, I think is really, should cause us to pause and consider why is it that the government is so hesitant to even consider or speak with people who have disagreements or who have new ideas. Why does everything have to come from the top? That's not the Métis way as I was raised.
Seraph, one of the issues also raised that I believe Red River Echoes is hoping to address at the Manitoba Metis Federation meeting this fall is around the Constitution, who's eligible to run for office, including president. Can you walk us through some of the rules that I guess aren't sitting well with some?
I actually think that Breanne would be better equipped to answer this question. Yeah.
Go ahead, Breanne.
Yeah, so the rules that we were looking at specifically come from the Constitution that was ratified in 2017. There was a resolution that was passed in 2017 at the AGA that changed the requirements for being eligible to run for president. Mm-hmm. Prior to that time, the Constitution required 1 year of volunteering on a local or as a board member. And then with this resolution that passed in 2017, there is now 3 years serving on a local and then 3 years serving as either a board member or another elected position. So in effect, after 2017, it went from a 1 year requirement to a 6 year requirement, and then also needing to wait for election cycles. So it would be possible that somebody who wanted to run for president would have to wait up to 8 years to be eligible to run. Those are the changes that we're looking to draw attention to. This happened only a few years ago. So really just wanting to look at the logic behind that, who thought this was a good idea, and change it if possible.
Well, as we know, the Manitoba Metis Federation held a virtual annual general meeting, and President Chartrand said those who question the rules need to do their homework, and later said, and this is a quote, that people that question the rules can, quote, go to hell. Seraph, what are your thoughts on some of the things that President Chartrand had to say at the AGA, some that seemed directed at Red River Echoes?
Well, first of all, there are some Métis people who feel that we're already in hell. So we are equipped to collect the voices of people who feel that they are silenced by the MMF. So the thing I wanted to say about that really is that I can understand how President Chartrand would react the way he did. It's an evolutionary response to be defensive and aggressive when something is, for us, is threatened, right? We weren't threatening anybody. We're not even convinced that he actually read that letter. We're thinking he skimmed Nigon's article in the paper. And so a lot of what he said, most of what he said in that, if not all of it, was untrue. So if that's what he really thought, I feel bad for him. And I also feel a bit miffed that that was the information then he was giving to the membership in attendance. That's not who we are. That's not what we want. That's not what we're about. That's not what we're insinuating even. What we want is a return to a more traditional Métis style of governance, as opposed to running our government like a corporation, and somewhat at this point, after a quarter of a century, like an oligarch. So, I mean, telling us to go to hell, getting angry at us, I mean, I'm not insulted. We're not insulted by that. We don't feel bad. We just realize that by taking opportunities like with you, we can say to people, please read our letters straight from us. please search out information, direct information. Don't just take what you hear secondhand from people that are angry. And that if anything that we have said resonates with you, we want to support you, people of the Métis Nation, and we want your support. And you can reach out to us. You can find us online, and we can talk about all of these issues as a collective, because that's what we are as a nation.
We're going to touch a bit more on this, but we do just have to step aside for another quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with Breanne, Lavallee-Heckert, and Seraph-Eden. Stay with us. Welcome back to Face. Our guests this week are Breanne, Lavallee-Heckert, and Seraph-Eden Carr of Red River Echoes, and we're a little short on time, but I did want to find out, I mean, you know, you talk about in the letter this colonialism in the governance model and a toxic workplace culture, you know, and assuring people, anyone who's afraid to speak out against the MMF's actions, that they're not alone. Was this a difficult decision for you to speak out and, you know, put your face, your names out there with these concerns? Seraph, maybe you first.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure some people are going to see my face and not like it, but I'm convicted that what we're doing in a good way, and we're doing because we love our nation and we love our parents' generation. We don't discount them. We're not throwing them away. We don't not acknowledge or appreciate all the hard work they've put in. In fact, we've been watching our whole lives. And so that's why we have this vested interest.
Breanne, was it a concern for you as well to be out front with this?
No, it was actually an easy decision. Last summer, I resigned from the Senate of Canada after one of my coworkers was falsely claiming to be Métis, and I put my name out there then, and I'll put my name out here now. Doesn't matter who I'm defending the nation for. Like that's what I'm here for, is to defend the nation at all costs. My face, my name is just part of the movement, and yeah, happy to stand up just like our ancestors did, and so honored to work with all of the people in this collective. You know, just imagining, you know, our ancestors dreaming of this day. And I think that joy is bigger than any fear over speaking out.
Yeah, hear, hear.
Well, I certainly do respect and appreciate both of you for speaking out and for joining us here on the show this week. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that is all the time we have. I should make mention, again, we did reach out to the MMF and have yet to hear back on some of these things, but more to come as the AGA happens this fall as well. That is all the time we have for this week. You can catch up on any episodes you may have missed by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca, and you can find this episode and all episodes as a podcast. Those are at aptnnews.ca/face-to-face podcast. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night. We'll see you back here next week.